This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
India's Prime Minister vows punishment for the guilty after train crash leaves 288 people dead. Death toll in Senegal's political protest rises to 15 after the sentencing of opposition leader Ousmane Sonko. And fighting escalates in Sudan as U.S. slaps sanctions on businesses owned by warring parties. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's begin with our top story. Authorities in India's eastern state of Odisha say all rescue operations have come to a close after a 3-train collision left at least 288 people dead and injured over 740 others. All victims and injured passengers have been removed from the accident site in India's worst train accident in over 2 decades. An investigation has been launched, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi vowed to prosecute anyone found to be responsible for the crash. Families of the dead have been promised compensation of about $12,000 each, with those injured getting just a quarter of that amount. The accident happened on Friday after a passenger train went off the tracks and hit another one in the east of the country. One train in the accident also hit a freight train parked nearby in the district of Balasore in Odisha state, leaving a tangled mess of smashed rail cars. India's deadliest railway accident occurred in 1981 when a train plunged off a bridge into a river in Bihar state, killing an estimated 800 people. In other news, to Senegal now, and the death toll from anti-government protests has risen to 15 after 2 days of unrest. Police said this on Saturday as authorities in the capital Dakar began clearing debris and securing looted shops. Most of Dakar appeared calm on Saturday, but tensions remained high after violent protests in several cities. Opposition leader Ousmane Sonko's sentencing on Thursday sparked the latest turmoil as protesters heeded his call to stand up to authorities. The government has enlisted the army to back up the many riot police still stationed around the city. The unrest is the latest in a string of opposition protests in Senegal, long considered one of Africa's most stable democracies. Concerns are rife that President Macky Sall will try to bypass the 2-term limit and run again during the February 2024 elections. Concerns Sall has neither confirmed nor denied. The Shangri-La Dialogue, Asia's premier defense and security summit, is underway in Singapore this weekend. Organized by the British think tank International Institute for Strategic Studies, or IISS. The summit has 41 countries, big and small, in attendance. Day 2 saw speeches by the U.S. Secretary of Defense as well as by defense ministers from Indonesia, Republic of Korea, the UK, Canada, and Ukraine. CGTN's Miro Liu has more on the events of the day from Shangri-La Hotel.
The Ukraine crisis, Korean Peninsula, maritime security and multilateralism in Asia-Pacific were the key talking points on Day 2 of the Shangri-La Dialogue. But a topic that dominated media headlines and most on-site discussions was the relationship between China and the U.S. During his plenary speech, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin proclaimed how the U.S. is strengthening ties with friends and allies in the Asia-Pacific.
And so our shared goals are clear: to deter aggression and to deepen the rules and norms that promote prosperity and prevent conflict. So we're stepping up planning and coordination and training with our friends from the East China Sea to the South China Sea to the Indian Ocean.
Rejecting Austin's claims, Lieutenant General Jing Jianfeng, who is part of General Li Shangfu's delegation, blamed the U.S. for making false accusations against China. He said the U.S. is using its Indo-Pacific strategy to preserve its dominant position in the region.
32 years after the Cold War, the U.S. has not only held on to the remnant of the Cold War, such as the Five Eyes Alliance and bilateral military alliances, but has acted against the trend of history, piecing together the Quad and AUKUS to divide the world into ideology-driven camps and provoke confrontation.
Experts from Europe stress that a working relationship between China and the US in the Asia-Pacific is crucial for the global supply chain as well as regional prosperity.
The stability, the strategic stability of the region is extremely important, including countries in the region who do not really want to take side between the US and China, also do not want to see the security situation to degenerate. And to them, the best way to maintain a balance is to have China on one side as a very important economic partner, but also the US and its allies on the other side as a way to balance.
Delegates from Southeast Asian countries hope ASEAN can become a central forum where nations can come sit together at a table and resolve their issues. That's exactly what Shangri-La Dialogue and its Singaporean host have been working on in the past 2 decades, to provide a safe platform for countries of all sizes to raise their most pressing security concerns. Mira Lu, CGTN, Singapore.
In Sudan, warring parties intensified fighting in the capital, Khartoum, following collapse of the Jeddah talks. Residents of Khartoum and Omdurman said the army had resumed airstrikes and was using more artillery. Sudanese paramilitary fighters have also taken over the National Museum in Khartoum, according to the museum's deputy director. This has raised fears for the safety of important artifacts, including ancient mummies, some dating as far back as 2,500 BC, among the oldest in the world. The U.S. and Saudi Arabia on Thursday suspended truce talks after a ceasefire they had mediated fell apart. The U.S. has gone further to impose sanctions on businesses belonging to the Army and RSF, with a senior U.S. official saying more action will be taken should the fighting persist. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council has renewed the mandate of the United Nations Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan for another 6 months. The mission was established in June 2020 to provide support to Sudan during its political transition to democratic rule. Now, to better understand what is next after the Sudanese army pulled out of the Jeddah ceasefire talks, political analyst Ammar Hassan shares his thoughts.
حسب ما ورد في بيان الجيش السوداني.
According to what was stated in the Sudanese Army statement, the Sudanese armed forces suspended the ongoing negotiations in Jeddah due to lack of commitment of the rapid forces, according to the text of the agreement that was signed in the city of Jeddah on 20th of May. However, in my opinion, the suspension of negotiations itself has nothing to do with the violations of the rapid forces. The two parties to the conflict in the country are committing continuous violations and have violated truces they agreed upon, but in my opinion, the matter depends on the multiplicity of decision-making centers within the Sudanese armed forces. According to the information we have, there is a very big division within the Sudan armed forces as to whether or not to continue with the Jeddah negotiations. I think this is the main reason of the suspension of negotiations. It is clear that the camp that rejected the continuation of the Jeddah negotiations had the upper hand in this matter. Of course, the army's suspension of negotiations in Jeddah will certainly have a negative impact on the ground. Over the past 2 days, we have seen an increase in the intensity of battles between the two sides. Yesterday and last night, they used heavy weapons, cannons and mortars, which resulted in heavy casualties among civilians. Yesterday, we followed the statement issued by the Sudan Medical Association about the death of 17 people in Mayo area south of Khartoum and the injury of more than 100 people. Certainly, this matter will be reflected on the ground in the inability of the organizations to deliver humanitarian aid. And it will be reflected in the humanitarian conditions, even from delivery of humanitarian aid, and it will also be reflected in the humanitarian conditions in all areas witnessed by the conflict.
Humanitarian workers now say fierce fighting, rampant looting, and general state of lawlessness and bureaucracies are making it hard to deliver important aid supplies to the millions of people in need with conflict raging in Sudan. CGTN's Enoch Sokolia reports.
The port of Sudan along the Red Sea, it has become a crucial center for aid deliveries, as well as a destination for government officials and diplomats fleeing the distant capital, but those dedicated to ensuring aid supplies reach those in need are meeting a myriad of challenges.
So it is very complicated. It's millions of people that are in those places that are unreachable at the moment. Often we cannot move because the warehouse is being looted, or because it's unsafe for our staff to move, or because for the transporter it's unsafe to go.
The acts of lawlessness are obstructing efforts by humanitarian organizations to provide assistance to millions of people in need. Their movements are often hindered due to the unsafe conditions. They say truck drivers have been detained severally and supplies seized. They say the situation has become dire. On June 1st, WFP's warehouse in El Obeid, a city southwest of Khartoum, was attacked. The attack on the warehouse, one of WFP's largest logistics bases in Africa, puts food supplies for 4.4 million people at risk. The UN agency says it has already lost $60 million worth of supplies in Sudan.
As much as we can respond, we are responding and we are providing support, but it's extremely challenging to meet all the needs and to reach everyone wherever they are.
There's just the general state of lawlessness, the lootings have been widespread, and just like the general criminality. And that of course adds a different layer and makes it an extremely volatile and difficult environment to be working in.
Communications have broken down, impeding the coordination of aid efforts and hindering payment processes for aid workers who now rely on mobile applications due to the disruption of the regular banking systems. They say securing visas to Sudan or travel permits to deliver relief food inside the country has become a struggle.
We need more supplies to be reaching Khartoum and also Darfur, and unfortunately under the current circumstances it has been extremely difficult to make sure that those supplies they get from warehouses to where they need to be.
General Mohammed Othman Mohammed, the military head of Red Sea State, reassures the public regarding aid distribution. He says there have been only minor delays due to security procedures.
There are no obstacles in distribution of aid, but there are small holdups during security procedures for delivery of aid to the intended recipient. The committee responsible for handling aid include the Ministry of Health, Humanitarian Assistance Commission, the Sudanese Red Crescent, and all the relevant parties.
The United Nations estimates that the number of people facing hunger will exceed 19 million in the coming month. Enoch Sikole, CGTN.
In again as Turkish president after winning last weekend's runoff election. The event took place at the Grand National Assembly. Erdogan earned 52.18% support in the runoff against a powerful opposition coalition on May the 28th. His new 5-year term will make him Turkey's longest-serving head of state. It comes amid an economic crisis and tensions with the West. Mihal Bardavid reports on the key agendas for Erdogan's new term.
He himself has mentioned in his first victory speech that the Turkish economy and inflation specifically is going to be one of the most urgent issues that need to be dealt with. Just to give you more specifics on inflation, last October, inflation had reached over 85.5%, and still in April it was for over nearly actually 43%, so it's still at very high level for Turkey, and Erdogan has promised to bring this down to single digits. He's also promised to increase wages for employees and retirees as well to compensate for the loss of welfare. And in regards to the impact of the devastating earthquakes that struck southeastern Turkey in February that killed over 50,000 people, he's also promised to build new homes in that region within 1 year. He's also promised to create 6 million new jobs within the next 5 years as well. And leading up to the election, Erdogan also made some critical diplomatic moves as well. Tension has been eased with some critical allies in the region with Saudi Arabia, Israel, Egypt. There have been some progress there. And Turkey also launched a reconciliation process with Syria as well. And looking ahead, Erdogan has also stressed during his victory speech that it's going to be important to win back the Istanbul mayorship for AK Party, as well as the country is going to go to local elections in 2024. So much ahead in the upcoming term for Erdogan as well.
All right, let's visit our top story at this hour. Authorities in India's eastern state of Odisha say all rescue operations have come to a close after a 3-train collision left at least 288 people dead and injured, over 740 others. All victims and injured passengers have been removed from the accident site in India's worst train accident in over 2 decades. Our reporter Ravinder Bawa now brings us more from Odisha.
Well, as indeed it is one of the worst, rail accidents that India has seen, with so many people being affected by it and hundreds being injured as well. And today, whole day and throughout the night yesterday, the rescue operations, the search operations were on. The NDRF, which is the National Disaster Response Force, the team was down there. The 2,000 personnel altogether, including various other agencies, were there on the ground, using cutters and different kind of equipment to rescue people who were inside these coaches, which were just on the tracks, one on top of the other. So that work went on, and by late afternoon today, the rescue and search operations were over, and then the action shifted to the hospitals, because all the severely injured people were brought to Cuttack, which is one of the big towns here near Balasore, where this accident has happened, and these people are being treated in Cuttack in a hospital here. Apart from that, there are bodies which are being which have been kept in various buildings in Balasore and the nearby areas, and they are being handed over to the relatives, and that's going to be one of the challenges for the authorities. Apart from that, investigations have been initiated. The Prime Minister was at the site, so was the Railway Minister. Compensation has been announced. So all kind of different steps are being taken, and now in the next 2 days it will be important to see if the death toll doesn't go up, and also to ensure that proper treatment is provided to the people who are severely injured and are in these various hospitals in the state of Odisha. The idea is to ensure a safe rail network across the country, which is the lifeline of the country, especially for a lot of, if we look at these 2 particular trains, they were actually carrying a lot of workforce from states like West Bengal and other parts to main cities like Bangalore and Chennai. We were talking to some of the people who survived this accident. They were saying that they have been doing these rounds for the last 10 years, through going from their hometowns to these cities in search of work, in search of livelihood. And those are the people who are worst affected in this accident. And that's the kind of people who travel, who use the rail network the most. And that's why it becomes very important for the government to look into the safety. Although we can say that in the previous, if we compare it to the previous years, the rail accidents have gone down. And one of the main reasons is, of course, derailment. And in this particular accident, what it looks like that the anti-collision system was not in place, and that's why this has happened. And now it is time that the government look at putting this anti-collision system in most of the rail lines across the country, because this enables the locomotive pilot to, it alerts them, and then they can use the braking system. There is a way to use automatic braking system as well. So it's going to be important and big challenge for the government now to improve the safety, which has been a challenge always, and there is a need to do much more than what the government has so far done in terms of ensuring safety of the rail network.
Mama
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees has said a lot more needs to be done to improve the living conditions of displaced people and refugees in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. A delegation of the UNHCR concluded a 3-day visit of Goma, during which they visited 2 camps. The team and some of the people at the camps acknowledged that efforts are being made to better the lives of those at the camps, but more remains to be done by the partner organizations in the DRC. The DRC has 6.2 million internally displaced persons, of which 2 million are in the province of North Kivu, living in camps for the displaced. The 26th Chinese Peacekeeping Engineering Detachment to the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo has begun carrying out repair works in the flash flood hit region. But this was only after being verified and given the green light by the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission, MONUSCO. The engineering department is responsible for repairing the Ludila Bridge that leads to the disaster region. The bridge was swept away by floods that hit the province of Sud Kivu in mid-May, with the road on either side of the bridge collapsing.
As messengers of peace, protecting the lives of people in the disaster zone, Chinese peacekeeping soldiers have a duty to perform. We will overcome all practical difficulties, remember our duty and mission, resolutely complete our rescue mission, open the lifeline for transporting relief supplies as soon as possible, and bring light and hope to the disaster zone through practical actions.
And we are not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Let's take a peek at the headlines. Ahead in sports, Kenya's Faith Kipyegon smashes the women's 1,500 meters world record in Florence, Italy.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome into Sport on Africa Live with me, Richard Nta. Let's start with athletics. Kenya's Faith Kipyegon made history at the Florence Diamond League meeting on Friday night by shattering the symbolic 3 minutes 50 seconds barrier while setting a new world record in the women's 1,500 meters. The 29-year-old Kenyan clocked 3 minutes 49.11 seconds to shatter the previous record of 3 minutes 50.07 seconds set by Ethiopia's Genzebe Dibaba at the 2015 Diamond League meeting in Monaco, with an awesome display from the 2-time Olympic and world champion. Kipyegon, considered the greatest ever woman in the discipline, crushed the rest of the field in Tuscany, finishing more than 12 seconds ahead of reigning European champion Laura Muir and Australia's Jessica Hull. She fell to her knees in joy and disbelief after conquering the record, the only major honor she had that has eluded her in her stellar career. All right, let's turn to football now, where the second leg of the CAF Confederations Cup finals will be played in the Algerian capital of Algiers tonight. Host USM Alger take on Tanzanian champions Young Africans, seeking to defend a 2-1 lead from the first leg played in Dar es Salaam last weekend. Yanga, however, needed a win of more than 2 goals to turn the tie in their favor and clinch their first ever continental trophy. The Tanzanians say mentality will be the biggest asset they need to face the Algerians. But despite the deficit from the first leg, Yanga midfielder Stefan Aziz Ki was more upbeat about his side's chances of winning the trophy.
I think it is a good opportunity for us in football. We have the chance to correct mistakes, which is the beauty of the game. We are facing a team that beat us at home. We know it is difficult mentally to accept a defeat, but it is now one match and then the final. And the final, you play to win it. There is no more thinking. We are positive and ready.
On their part, USM Alger are strong favorites to lift the CAF Confederation Cup at home for their first ever continental title. Abdelhak Ben Chika's men won the opener 2-1 in Tanzania last Sunday, but nothing is being taken for granted. The hosts only need to avoid defeat to make history. Around 60,000 fans will be behind USMA players at the 5th of July Stadium, hoping to urge on their team to glory.
Everything is going well. We came back from Tanzania after the first match and went into preparations straight away. No time wasted. We have been concentrating on the task ahead. We have lived in the moment together and prepared the team tactically and mentally. The team is ready to do their job.
English Premier League champions Manchester City have won the FA Cup after a 2-1 win over rivals Manchester United at Wembley Stadium on Saturday. The citizens got off to a flying start after Ilkay Gundogan netted after just 13 seconds with a half volley. The game swung back and forth, and despite City seeming to be in control of the match, United were awarded a penalty in the 33rd minute. Bruno Fernandes stepped up and slotted it in to level the scores 1-1 at halftime. After the break, City came back with intent, and Gundogan scored his second in almost similar fashion. This was the end of the scoring as City held on for a 2-1 win at full time to win a 7th FA Cup title and second trophy of the season, as they target to be the only second English team after United to win the treble. They face Inter Milan next Saturday in the UEFA Champions League finals. And finally, in motorsports, Sebastian Ogier of France has taken a clear lead of the WRC Rally Italia Sardinia on Saturday as he closes in on victory. The 8-time world champion driving a Toyota started the day narrowly behind Finn Esapakalapi in Hyundai. Now, after the pair exchanged the lead in the opening 2 stages in Albia, Ogier took a 12.7 seconds lead on the next. The following stage, the 11th of 19, Ogier extended his lead to 18.2 seconds. Third after 11 stages was Belgium's Thierry Neuville, 6.5 seconds behind his Hyundai teammate Lappi. Championship leader Toyota driver Kalle Rovanperä of Finland was fourth, almost 38 seconds further back. Estonia's Ott Tänak dropped out of a contention when his Ford stopped after going through a water splash. And a similar fate met Japan's Takamoto Katsuta in his Toyota. Well, that is it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send us your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. For the team, I'm Richard Nta saying thank you so much for watching. Up next is Talk Africa with Beatrice Marshall, and I'll be right back in the seat again at the top of the hour with Sports Scene. Stay tuned.